Hi, and welcome to the Mechanics of Healing. This is part 2A. We'll be dealing with the soul structure. What is the soul? To many people, it is an amorphous thing that they know very little about. To others, it is completely denied. They say if you can't see it, it can't be there. Yet many books on spirituality speak about the soul, but don't quite define it. In this course, we define what the soul is, how it works, and how it manifests itself every day in our lives, and why soul health is as important, if not more important, than physical health. Before we deal with healing the body, let's look at the structure of the soul body. Just as in the physical body, its anatomy and physiology is quite complex, but not complicated to understand. Let's begin by doing a bit of revision on what we have already learned about the soul in this course. The mechanics of Merkaba, the chakras, the evolutionary journey of the soul. In those courses, I have explained that everything is about the frequencies of light and sound waves, and that our consciousness, that is our self-awareness, is a field of energy called soul, or life force, or chi. Emerging from that life force is an eternal evolving soul being who lives many lifetimes, evolving their conscious soul being through a multidimensional structure and a universal creation and design template through space and time. This conscious awareness of the self by observation of its reality creates a holographic reality field through which they provide for themselves experiences through a projection of their thought, the electric wave, and emotions, the magnetic wave, energy pulses. These experiences are self-designed by the conscious mind, if one is indeed consciously aware. To integrate their holographic experiences with their soul essence, thus contributing and building a stronger and more coherent energy field. To understand the role of the Merkaba and Vortices, let's compare it to a power grid that we all are familiar with, that is our electricity power grid. Our electricity power grids have three components. There's the power generation by power stations, power transmission through overhead transmission lines, and power distribution through power distribution at the local level. In this analogy, and comparing it to the energy system of our souls, the Merkabas are the power generation, the chakras are the transmission lines, and the Kathara points in the body are the distribution points of the soul energy body. We will deal with the Kathara grid and points later in this course. So with all this amazing potential and creative ability, what went wrong? That's where understanding Merkaba and vortex mechanics comes in. What went wrong with Earth's Merkaba and vortex fields? So it's time to delve a little bit deeper into Earth's hidden history to understand what happened. We learned that the Earth has a 556 million year old history and has experienced a number of what are called falls. The first fall was when a planet from which Earth originated, called Tara, in harmonic bandwidth 4 to 7 dimension, was recklessly blown up by competing higher dimensional beings who were appointed guardians over the Lyran star system and over certain harmonic bandwidth 2 planets. This was called the Taurometium I project, created by the Lyran and Syrian councils. Tara was smashed into 12 bits, and one of these bits became Eartha, our Earth, and the other 11 bits, the other planets in our solar system. When Tara broke apart, the forces of the electromagnetic force waves, which are stronger than the forces of our nuclear explosions that caused her demise, not only broke apart the physical planet Tara, but ripped her universal soul template apart, so that the various bits that were blown apart carried parts of Tara's soul template within their planetary soul bodies, and so had to be reconstructed. The Lyran and Syrian councils, together with among others, the Palladian, Arcturian, and Andromedan councils, created the Galactic Federation of Councils, and they launched their Christos realignment and rescue mission, the purpose and goal of which was to rescue and restore Tara's universal soul template. Through various agreements, it was decided that these bits of Tara would be held in the morphogenetic field of a star system in the Milky Way galaxy by a star called Sol in harmonic bandwidth 2. This arrangement made these planets vulnerable to distortion and manipulation by the fallen angelics under the Luciferian rebellion. So the Galactic Federation of Councils have intervened over time to correct any distortion and manipulation by the fallen angelics according to the law of one. However, the law of one makes provision for the sovereignty of the soul's free will. So all soul beings within the matrix of control systems would have to act within the law of one and act as sovereign soul beings to disengage and free their soul energy from any matrix of control. In other words, if sovereign soul beings are trapped within a herd mentality and don't exercise their sovereign free will independently of their own best interests, they can be trapped within a matrix of control. So while the federations of the galactic councils will assist where they can based on the law of one, it requires that independent sovereign soul beings should be aware of the law of one, the power that they hold in their soul energy bodies and fields, and their connection to the universal creation and design template through the sound and light fields. This will be explained further as we go along. The second fall happened approximately 25,500 years ago. It is difficult to put a defined date on this because there are a number of different calendars operating on this planet. We in the West use the Gregorian calendar instigated by Pope Gregory XIII. In the universe, time is based on what is called a cosmic clock, and are all called phases, based on the number 12. There have been 3 seedings on Earth over the years, and we are the progeny of the 3rd seeding. Approximately 25,500 years ago, and just before the last stellar activation cycle and ascension cycle, the Earth was still in harmonic bandwidth 2, where humans had 4 strands of DNA activated and with 12-strand DNA potential in their soul body structures. Humans were called angelic humans then, and the Earth and its inhabitants were greatly admired for their great mineral wealth and the greatest of diversity in microbial, vegetable, insect, reptile, avian, fish, and animal species in the universe, and Eartha was considered to be the jewel of the universe because of this vast wealth in diversity. Earth's planetary, solar, and galactic stargates were fully intact and operational then. Earth was very cosmopolitan and the greatest trading center in our solar system, and was much coveted by the fallen angelics. It has also been granted the favor of hosting a universal stargate at the pyramids of Giza in Egypt, which is a great privilege. This is a rare favor in the universe. Things were going very well for Earth then, but blinded by their status and position, the leadership on Earth began to be impressed with the knowledge of the Anunnaki, draconian traders, and at the behest of the Anunnaki draconians began to entertain the idea of attracting the moon into Earth's orbit, the purpose of which would be to have reflected light from the moon on Earth during hours of darkness. And so it was agreed with the Anunnaki draconians and Earth's leadership that a moon, a fragment of rock, or so they thought, from the asteroid belt would be attracted into Earth's orbit by the Anunnaki draconians. This first experiment was a resounding success, and Earth's human angelics marveled at the spectacle of the moon, lighting up their dark nights. Little did the human leadership know that this moon was a hollow, manufactured and phase-locked broadcast station for the blank slate technology beast system that the Anunnaki draconians intended to use as part of their long-term plan to set siege to Earth's population. In other words, a Trojan horse. The first moon, our current moon, was phase-locked into a 28-day rotational cycle, instead of a 24-day rotational cycle, which meant that at some times during the month there were parts of Earth that were in darkness. The Anunnaki draconians offered to fix this by attracting the smaller moon, but closer to Earth, and it would also be phase-locked into a 28-day cycle to follow the cycles of the first moon, so the Earth would have undisturbed 24 hours of light. The human Earth leadership agreed to the second experiment, unaware that the Anunnaki draconians had already set up their blank slate technologies that would be broadcast from Saturn to Mercury, to Mars, and to our moon, whose rotational spin would be phase-locked into the rotational spin of Earth, that is, one rotation every 24 hours, so that the Earth inhabitants would only see the one side of the moon. Now, this is an unnatural occurrence in the universe. Not only would the moon be a broadcast station for the Anunnaki draconians, it would also be a landing station for the fallen ones from the dark side of the moon. When Earth scientists measure the resonance capacity of the moon, they agree that it rings like a bell and resonates and sends signals to Earth. Of course, mainstream science has not picked up on this and are in denial of the truth. But who can blame them when their income and research grants depend on compliance with the narrative of the Anunnaki draconians? The second experiment was an unmitigated disaster for the human angelics, but a triumph for the Anunnaki draconians. The second smaller asteroid moon collided with Earth, resetting the Earth's rotational spin at an angle of 23.5 degrees to its magnetic rotation. 90 degrees minus 23.5 degrees equals 6.6 degrees. Was this the original mark of the beast? The dust from the impact began to cover many parts of the Earth, blocking out the warmth of the sun, ushering in what is called the Ice Age, that lasted approximately 10,000 years. The Anunnaki draconians did this because of their knowledge of Merkaba and vortex mechanics, and they used this knowledge to control the Earth and its people. This event was recorded in the Bible as the Tower of Babel, where humans had a confusion of languages and were unable to recognize themselves and each other. Explaining why this was so is what this course is about. What caused humans to lose their identity and memories? The act of offsetting the rotational spin of the Earth with its magnetic spin at an angle of 23.4 degrees meant that the Merkaba spin of the planet no longer aligned with the universal compass magnetic north-south. The human angelics on Earth lost contact with their soul ancestry and forgot who and what they were. The Lord that the Bible refers to are the new Anunnaki draconian landlords, who had taken over the planet's Merkaba fields and energy fields. It had the same effect as when turning an aerial or an antenna 23.4 degrees away from an existing broadcast signal and towards a new broadcast station, the beast, the blank slate technology. There followed a long history be covered in a future course. Suffice it to say that the Earth's energy wobble has left its populations vulnerable to attack from the Anunnaki draconian controllers here. In the course of Merkaba and Vortex Mechanic, we shared a technique to correct and realign the angle of our Merkaba fields. The science of Merkaba mechanics is as ancient as the Earth itself. The secrets of Merkaba mechanics have been guarded and protected by the fallen ones because it is the mechanism by which they hold human consciousness captive. When the second moon was introduced and collided with Earth, it did a number of things. Firstly, it misaligned Earth's magnetic polarity with its rotational polarity, thus rendering Earth's Merkaba field distorted and weakened. This meant that the Earth was deprived of the benefits of a properly functioning Merkaba field. Earth's progression through its own soul evolutionary path was disrupted. And until Earth's Merkaba field is fully restored, the Earth will not be able to draw in the higher frequency energies and will therefore be disconnected from the universal energy fields. We, however, can consciously correct distortions in our personal Merkaba field and feed that or anchor that into the Earth's grids, thus assisting Earth. A Merkaba field can be described by its ability to organize and generate energy, its ability to create a protective energy force field around itself, and its ability to be the vehicle that carries its sentient matter being through space and time. It is also the viewing point from which we create and experience our reality. First off, how does a Merkaba field generate power? That is where the understanding of vortex mechanics comes into play. We can see and experience many natural earth phenomena that generate and collect vast amounts of expendable energy. These include, but are not limited to, electric storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and tornadoes. All of these phenomena are created by power differentials, that is, differences in temperature, atmospheric pressure, spin speed, geometry, etc. Let's examine what the properties of a natural organic energy generation system are. Firstly, there are natural organic flows of energy caused by differentiation. Secondly, these differential flows of energy cause vortices. Human scientists haven't pursued this because if we understood and propagated this knowledge and understanding, we would be able to create free energy and free energy devices that would not suit the agenda of the fallen ones who want to keep us as slaves to their unnatural, inorganic, kinetic energy that serves two purposes: enslavement of humanity and destruction of the environment. So it is important to understand natural, organic flows of energy caused by differentiation and how these differential flows of energy cause vortices. Applying these principles of differentiation and vortices, let me explain how the Merkaba works. The symbol of the Merkaba in ancient writings and drawings is the Star of David. This symbol is shown as a two-dimensional, unanimated representation of the Merkaba. But if we understood the dynamic principles of natural organic energy generation and properly animate the symbol, it is a natural organic energy generator. The way climate works is very similar to how Merkaba and vortex mechanics work, and now I'll explain it. Everything in the universe is a fractal of the universal creation and design template. The climate system doesn't work as well as it used to before the Earth's axis was tilted. Our Mother Earth is a sentient soul being that has a Merkaba field. Everything that produces and can hold energy has a Merkaba field. The Merkaba field is an etheric structure of electromagnetism that is based on the universal design templates, and its geometry is natural and organic, with occurring differentials. And the structure of the Merkaba field holds and produces energy for the survival of all sentient beings. I know that sounds like a minefield of information, but we'll unpack that as we go along. What follows in this lesson may at first seem irrelevant, but they are principles we find all over the universe. So one doesn't have to fully understand what is being taught here as long as one has some grasp of the principles involved. A Merkaba field is the energy producer of all sentient life, and is the theatre of reality in which we experience our lives and reality in the hologram. Everything that has energy and produces energy has a Merkaba field. This energy is called life force, or prana, or chi. Mother Earth has a Merkaba field, and so does our Sun and our solar system, as does our galaxy, as does our universe. We may call it different names here, but no one is telling us exactly how and why it works the same everywhere in the universe. When the Earth's axis was tilted 23.4 degrees off its central vertical magnetic alignment, it distorted our Merkaba energy fields that created an energy wobble that will be explained further as we go deeper into this. More importantly, it changed the angle of rotation of particle spin of all atoms, molecules, and cells, so that all particles that are aligned with the magnetic field no longer hold their full energy holding and production capacity. This will become clearer later in this lesson. In other words, all the atoms in our body have a distorted angle of rotation or particle spin compared to the upright alignment of the physical body. This misalignment causes health issues, a rapid deterioration of the cellular structure of the physical body, and eventually contributes to premature death of the physical body. Eternal soul beings are not meant to have this rapid deterioration of the physical body. It only occurs because of the misalignment of the particles, atoms, in the body compared to our upright alignment of our physical bodies. It is an energy wobble. The angle of rotation of our Merkaba fields and the particle spin of atoms will be corrected during Mother Earth's and our ascension. In the universe, everything is in constant motion. Even when we are asleep in our beds, we are in fact moving, sometimes at great speed through the universe. The Earth is rotating and spiraling around the Sun, and the Sun is rotating and spiraling around the galaxy. Let's now look at the mechanics at work in storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and tornadoes. All of these phenomena require movement, motion, geometry, shape, differentials, difference in temperature and air pressure, etc., and are transported through a medium, air, to produce natural organic energy during a storm. These elements are also present in the Merkaba, that is the energy generation system of the body, and gives and maintains life force energy, prana or chi. So let's look at them one by one. Movement. As stated earlier, everything in the universe is in constant movement and motion, relative to everything else in the universe. So movement is the change in perspectives that a point in time and space provides to the time and space experience. In our physical world, this movement is given by the rotation of the Earth on its axis and the Earth rotating around the Sun. But where does this movement come from? It is the reflection of what we said earlier. In the universe, everything is in a constant state of motion. It is the movement and rotation of the Earth that gives us day and night, morning and evening, dusk and dawn, the wind, the seasons, the climate, the storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and tornadoes. Movement causes friction between differentials like matter and air, water and land, and is the fundamental cause of adaptability. It is the fundamental movement and rotation of the Earth that provides for us life force and balance. Geometry and shape. How does the geometry of the Earth affect the weather and climate? Besides the fact that it is spinning, it spins at different speeds depending on where you are relative to the equator. The Earth rotates once every 23 hours, 56 minutes and 4.09053 seconds, called the sidereal period, and its circumference is roughly 40,075 kilometers. Thus the surface of the Earth at the equator moves at a speed of 460 meters per second, or roughly 1,000 miles per hour, and becomes progressively less and further one moves vertically from the equator. So the geometry of the Earth causes differentials of the ground spin speed relative to where one is in relation to the equator. At the north and south poles, the spin speed is near zero. But where does this geometry and shape of the Earth come from? It comes from something called cymatics. Cymatics is the study of visible sound and vibration. Is geometry a product of the underlying wave motion of magnetic sounds? How can sound be visible? Let's have a look at how cymatics work. The world of cymatics gives us a different view and provides a major evolution in our understanding of how sound affects all of us. Cymatics gives validity to the fact that everything that we perceive as hard objects, including our bodies, are actually continuously vibrating at their own rates. This principle of cymatics leads to a fundamental principle about geometry and sacred geometry and symbols. Inasmuch as sound produces shapes in the hologram, so do shapes and symbols in the hologram carry the information from the sound fields. As waves of sound create geometry, so does the geometry carry the information conveyed by the sound waves. This is relevant to the importance of geometry, sacred geometry, and symbols that we will deal with in future courses. So it is our observation of it, combined with the universal principles of holographic creation, that causes the Earth to be flat or round. In fact, from an energetic standpoint, it is both. It is our observation of it from our own perspective that creates the illusion of flat and round, whereas we shall see it is both flat and round like a toroid. And that's what a toroid looks like. Geometry, when combined with movement and mass, creates leverage, momentum, torque, and amplified energy. So let's explore what leverage, torque, and amplified energy are. This principle of cymatics leads to a fundamental principle about geometry, sacred geometry, and symbols. Inasmuch as sound produces shapes in the hologram, conversely, shapes and symbols carry the information for what caused them, that is, the magnetic sound fields. What is leverage? Leverage is when a lever amplifies an input force to provide a greater output force, which is said to provide leverage. This is a simple illustration of this principle, where the force applied is equal to the force provided when they are in balance. On the left you have the force you produce, and on the right you have the force you apply. And if you change the center of gravity of this seesaw or lever, the forces will also change. In the illustration below, we see how the small force creates the same energy as a large force, mass, and gravitation when a lever or leverage is applied at an increased distance. There we have a small force which requires little effort and a load closer to the fulcrum. The small force requires less energy than the weight of the load when leverage is applied. When it's the distance times the force that creates what is called force. Now, when these principles are applied to our Earth's geometry, we can see how the force at the equator is greater than the force at the poles. The Earth is spinning around its center. That creates more leverage, that the further the distance is away from its center. So at the equator, the Earth has more force and more momentum than at the poles. And this momentum creates a differential that causes the Earth to spin counterclockwise, just in the Borealis effect in weather. Leverage can also be considered to be borrowed energy, like when you buy a house and use a mortgage loan to borrow enough money to buy a house. That is leverage or gearing. This borrowed money is an energy exchange, provides a momentum or motivation to buy the home. The borrowed money is the leverage. This principle of leverage can also be described as gearing. We see this principle of gearing in our motor vehicles. The first gears are very large and create the momentum for the forward momentum of the vehicle, but is unable to sustain the momentum at a higher speed, so we change gears to a smaller set of gears to increase the momentum. This principle is called the principle of moments, where we get the word momentum from. This principle is used in many different ways. For instance, in heavy lifting machinery, in its early use it was first used as a single gear and was popular on farms. So you had a wheel at its rotating around its center, and the further the larger the wheel, circumference of the wheel, the more force or energy or more leverage was created. And farmers used this by pulling on the rope, and so they could lift large bales of hay, which they wouldn't be able to lift with their bare hands, but they were able to do it using this principle of leverage. Because the force required by the farmer pulling on the rope was less than the actual weight of the hay, but the leverage, the force of leverage, enabled the farmer to create more leverage for themselves and therefore greater force. Later on, it was discovered that the efficiency of lifting objects was enhanced by adding further gears. So there were 2 gears, and this doubled a leverage that was provided by this machine. You might wonder what this has to do with Merkaba fields. Let me explain it this way. Everything in the universe is codependent and borrows energy from a stronger force by leveraging that borrowed energy to sustain its momentum and create a greater force than its original form. The Earth borrows or leverages the gravitational force of the Sun through distance to gain and sustain its own evolutionary and rotational momentum. And we borrow the Earth's energy in our energy cell fields in order to gain and sustain our own energy. These principles of leverage and momentum are fundamental to understanding the law of one, that is, codependence. If we observe nature in an intelligent way, we will see this principle in action. Everything borrows or feeds off the energy of others. Seeds borrow the energy in the soil, the light from the sun, the water in the ground, and the air around it in order to grow. Our bodies borrow and feed off the energy of minerals, plants, birds, fish, animals, air, water, and the sun in order to grow. Just as we borrow money, we are required to pay it back. So does leverage require not just a borrowing system, but a payback system as well. This exists in our Merkaba fields. It borrows energy and pays back the energy. But sadly, humans have largely failed in their energy payback by borrowing energy, holding onto it and not paying it back to those they have borrowed from. The minerals, plants, birds, fish, animals, air, water, and the sun, and each other. And they don't respect and honor all of these things they continuously feed off. This is a dereliction of our duties as guardians of Mother Earth. In the universe, payback is like a circle, the circle of life. We pay back when we pay back to others as well. It's not just a direct payment, but an indirect payment as well. So when we give to others, we are paying back what we receive from the circle of life. And we increase our leverage when we give more money than we receive, in order to increase the gearing, leverage, and momentum for not only ourselves, but others also. That is how the universe works. A discussion about leverage would be incomplete without an understanding of torque. What is torque? Torque is a twisting or turning force that tends to cause rotation around an axis, which might be a center of mass or a fixed point. Torque is often used to describe the optimum force that can be obtained through leverage, such that the outgoing input force is greater than the initial force, for instance in a motor engine in motor vehicles. Leverage has restraints. One cannot borrow energy that one will not be able to pay back. This is called the gearing or leverage ratio. One can increase or decrease torque by increasing or decreasing the circumference of the axle, for example. Optimum torque creates a force greater than the original force, such that the outgoing force is optimally greater than the original force. One cannot borrow energy that is beyond one's ability to pay back. So the optimal torque is the extent that one can borrow energy and pay it back comfortably. This is also called the gearing or leverage. All of the principles discussed in this lesson are relevant to how natural organic energy is created in nature, in storms, hurricanes, typhoons, and tornadoes. Movement, geometry, differentials, momentum, leverage, torque, and the medium that carries them are all relevant to how storms and weather systems are created. And these principles also apply to how natural organic energy is produced by Merkaba fields. Thank you for watching. Be sure to watch the next part 2B that will deal with the energy transmission system we call chakras. You can find out more about Merkaba field and how it works in my course on Merkaba and vortex mechanics. Many thanks.